Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my AM reading video for Friday, February 27th, 2026, going up on a Saturday. So yeah, here we are. We've reached the end of the month, especially as I'm posting this, and I'm feeling pretty good. Well, especially about my booktube scheduling. I think I've done much better with it than I have in previous months where I've let a lot of time elapse because I was struggling to keep up with my commitments. But my scheduling for this month went really well. And I also think my reading this month went really well. I maybe should give myself a bit of a pat on the back because it is a shorter month after all. And I'm hoping to attribute 9 books total to this month. Granted, I'll be rolling a couple of them over and technically finishing them in March, but that's pretty normal for me. So I won't penalize myself for that. The most important thing is to keep reading and hopefully, enjoy or get something out of your reading. And I have some books to share that I've gotten some things out of that I'll share right now. So the first thing, though, I'll start with is reading a short story from a literary journal. This is what I do in my Am Reading videos. Right now I am reading from Ploughshares. This is the Spring 2025 edition. And the story I read from is called Here and Now by Nathan Blum. This is an interesting tale about a young boy named Oren. Well, he's actually, I think, around 15, technically speaking. And his gist is that he and his mother move around a lot. She works as a scientist looking after basically the national deer population, and particularly a disease that a lot of them are catching. And she moves him around, basically tracking the migration patterns of the deer and this disease. And Oren is meanwhile just trying to keep up with school and relationships, what he can make of relationships. So this part starts out where they're living in New York, and he meets this girl, Imogen, because they're assigned to do, I think, a history project together. And from there, they get to know each other, and they start a little bit of a relationship. But always in the background, there's the thought that, this relationship could be pretty fleeting. Like, early in the story, there's a foreshadowing note where the mother tells Oren that, the disease might have migrated to Minnesota. So guess where, they end up by the end of this story. But basically it's telling a tale about, I guess, the sad reality is that Oren is a pretty lonely teenager, that he's, trying to get to know people and have these pretty normal teenage experiences, like having his first girlfriend. And, for a lot of Americans, and maybe other groups as well, I think, many people stay in the same place for most of their formative lives. And so, all of their experiences are in one place where they can, truly have a relationship with people. But for Oren, he's going to, move away even as he and Imogen are getting closer. And also, there's some commentary on the fact that, the mother, in a way, has chosen this nomad lifestyle because it seems like she doesn't have any other family. Like at one point, Oren comes across her grieving her father that he didn't even know about. So, this kind of fits her, but, he's her dependent. And is kind of tagging along for the ride. So there's some inherent, I guess, questions about, what the decisions you make do to your children. I do think, there was sort of a little bit of distance from the story. Maybe there's like so much physical description, like that's, I think, the author's way of trying to keep out of being too melodramatic with the emotions. And it led to maybe a little bit of a pat ending where now Oren is in Minnesota and he's undergoing dental treatment, and there's like a metaphor about how, things hurt, but he keeps quiet about it because, everything passes. But, it's obviously a rumination on what this type of lifestyle does to the normal growth patterns of, speaking of another, population of young growing teenagers, but how, this lifestyle has impeded that for Oren. Next, I finished The Magnificent Esme Wells by Adrienne Sharp, which I talked about a bit in my last Am Reading video. One thing I didn't mention, I don't think, is that this is a Jewish story, which would have made more sense as I was talking about an irony with a Nazi subplot where they thought that the Nazis thought that she well, the Nazi sympathizers in the US, I should say, thought that Esme was you know, an Aryan because of her blonde hair. Anyway, this story has a dual timeline. One takes place in Los Angeles in late 1930s, and the other takes place in Las Vegas in the late 1940s to early 1950s. And it's a Bildungsroman for Esme, who had a very unorthodox childhood. Her parents, you know, her mother was a wannabe starlet, and her father was a bit of a gambler and con man, and they ultimately, well, she and her father, after her mother dies, end up in Las Vegas helping the gangsters build up the casinos and the hotels there. And there's a lot of rumination in here about, you know, what it's like to be a young girl to a young woman in this very male and machismo world, where first, you know, these gangsters might try to protect you as a young girl, but then they start to groom you and be more of a predator. And Esme, within this story, where she herself is a strong character who has a desire for a little bit of fame, and it you know, comes onto, you know, the stages of these Las Vegas hotels, she gains the attention of this particular, you know, fictional mobster who is, you know, older than her father even, and she becomes his lover for a while. But then things ultimately go south, especially because, you know, he's drawing her closer and closer to a violent lifestyle that she doesn't really want to be a part of. And then her father is continuing his old habits of, you know, kind of gambling and taking too much even from his bosses, who are dangerous men in and of themselves. So the ending is a bit explosive, but I thought it was a moving story about the experiences that this particular type of person in a particular type of atmosphere could have. And it certainly says something about being a woman in the world. And there's a lot of, you know, lurid description about, you know, these particular times and places. I would quibble a little because I think maybe, to use more modern parlance, Esme has a little bit too much main character syndrome where, you know, even, yeah, she is the main character, we get it, but, you know, maybe too many crazy things happen to her, although, you know, it's sort of built up why she might be as infamous in her society as she is. But anyway, overall, I found it, you know, an enjoyable read, and maybe even more contemplative than some of the reviews I read would have led me to believe. Next, I read Golden States by Michael Cunningham in its entirety over a weekend, which was a really fun experience, and it allowed me to finally make my Michael Cunningham author backlist video a couple videos ago, so I'll link to that down below, because I was talking about this book and two others of his that I've read recently. This, I believe, is Michael Cunningham's first published novel that isn't even talked about that much anymore. It was written in the 80s, and I have some personal thoughts about, you know, some things that didn't age well, I think, with this novel. But I really found it to be a very moving Bildungsroman, and if you do watch my other video, I basically spoiled the entire plot. Maybe that's okay for a very obscure 1980s book, I don't know, but here I'll just try to be more of a summary gal. We are following David for a week of his life in 1980s Southern California. His sister Janet briefly returns home. She'd broken off an engagement with her fiance Rob because she was worried he'd hold her back from being more independent. But Rob is very much pressuring her to come back to him. And in David's you know, personal life, he has this falling out with a friend who starts to become a bit violent and abusive toward him in some other ways as well, and he has that backstory with his father, who's now no longer in the picture. So he's dealing with a lot in his life about how to, I think, handle a lot of these, you know, situations that are psychologically unsound. And I think he also is pretty coded to, you know, come off as a gay character, and that's further explored in a subplot near the end of the book. But some of the major action happens when his sister Janet does leave with her fiance again, and David goes on this rather crazy quest, a fantastical almost quest, to try and save her. And so there's a lot of disquieting things in here about the nature of violence and how it changes people's perceptions of you and maybe even gives you a sense of power. And then also the sexual component is a bit questionable because David's first experience, which doesn't go actually that far actually, but it is with a much older man, and I think that the way it might have been talked about in this cover copy and by the literary establishment of the 1980s isn't the way we talk about it today. But despite these issues, I feel like it's, you know, the way the character is drawn, it's a very realistic depiction of what he and his family would be going through. And so in that way, I found it a very compelling and thoughtful read, and I'm very grateful that I read this book. Next, I'll talk about Dream Count by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. This book was one of my anticipated reads from 2025, and I even, you know, got the book signed at the National Book Festival, where I got plenty of bookmarks as well, but here's my signed book. So I'm very excited to finally get to this. I'm in very much early days of this book. We've just been introduced to the first character who's narrating. Let me just check. Her name is Chiamaka, and she's very much narrating from, you know, in the depths of the COVID crisis where everyone is isolated and, you know, there's a lot of fear and concern about the virus and how it spreads. And there's just, you know, we're in early days of understanding it and trying not to let the virus get too out of control. But it certainly has its psychological effects as Chiamaka's, you know, isolating by herself in Maryland and resorting to Zoom calls with her family who live around the world, mostly in Nigeria. And then we get into a little bit of backstory, I guess, where we're trying to understand, you know, what she's missing out on with being isolated from the world. So we're starting to get into her love life and her past relationships a little bit. Chiamaka is a writer. It makes me roll my eyes a little when writers write about writers, but that's okay. You know, I think so far I'm invested. I really like Adichie's writing style. It's definitely too early for me to have a full opinion about the book as I continue to go on with it. This leads me to thinking that maybe I should go ahead and actually do a February reading wrap-up video in a week or so because, you know, usually I don't do those sort of videos if I am reading videos for the month, but the reading wrap-ups can be pretty popular, and it's a way to actually wrap up all of my reading, including my, you know, ultimate thoughts about this book. So maybe I'll be back to talk about it a bit in the future, and if not, I'll certainly be reviewing it on Goodreads. I'll also mention, not sure why I'm outing myself, but I actually am listening to the audiobook, even though, you know, I own this wonderful physical copy that I definitely want to keep since I got it signed. But there is a reason for me listening to the audiobook. And that's because I'm currently in the middle of reading this physical book. This is A Flower Traveled in My Blood, the incredible true story of the grandmothers who fought to find a stolen generation of children by Haley Cohen Gilliland. It's hard to say long titles like this, but this is one I definitely have to, you know, read and assess ASAP. But I'll say quickly that this is a story, as mentioned, a nonfiction account of the Abuelas de Plaza de Mayo, a human rights group that grew out of the junta in Argentina in the 1970s and 80s, which was a violent regime that took care of dissenters by doing some really brutal crackdowns, you know, torture, killings, and disappearances of thousands of people, including pregnant women, and part of that might have been because they were actually trying to get these babies, you know, force adoptions, that these babies would be given to friends of the regime, as it were. But then the biological grandparents never knew what happened to the babies or to their disappeared children either. So anyway, it's a harrowing tale that I won't go into in any more detail because I am reading this book for the BookTube Prize. So the BookTube Prize was started by Robert Sheard back in 2019 as a way for the literary bookternet to come together and judge the best in literary fiction and nonfiction published in English in the US the year before. So this year we are currently judging 2025 releases. We have 4 rounds where we whittle down our long lists until we get to winners and runners-up at the end of the year. We're currently in the first round, the octafinals, and I am reading from nonfiction Group G. where I pit this book against 5 others and then decide which ones I want to advance to the next round. But in the meantime, I zip my lips so that I don't influence other judges. However, I did make a preliminary thoughts video for this ballot, which I'll link down below, as well as the link to the BookTube Prize website. And that about covers it for me. Hoo boy, I always feel like I ramble off into crazy directions in these videos. The last 2 have been relatively shorter. I'm not sure how this one will go, but I'll have to wait a little bit to do my post-production because I gotta get up and go into work now. But expect me back on this channel in the near future, in very early March, hopefully, with my February book haul video. It'll be short and sweet, so stay tuned for that. I hope all of you have had a wonderful reading month for February and are patting yourself on the back for getting through all you got through in this short month. I'd love to hear about your thoughts about your reading. I think overall my reading month has been pretty good. I'm really enjoying it. So yeah, thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.